bottom, bottom, bottom. I don't know what I'm doing right there. I just wanted to do something a little different for the intro for that one because I feel like I say the same things every time. So I just had to make some weird random noises. Welcome back, y'all. Episode number 61 of the Ecom Dispensary. This came from a recommendation from Ecom Dispensary member Josh Rivers. Shout out the boy Josh. I think this is a great example that we do oftentimes actually listen to what you guys want us to talk about. Here we are. Josh threw this in the Telegram a few days back. He asked us what we would consider to be low-hanging fruit in the dropshipping world. I thought this was a really great I thought this was a really great question because I like the way that he asked it, because it's not like what's the easiest way to get started dropshipping. Like that's just kind of a lazy question. I really like thinking of things in these terms. What's the low-hanging fruit? Because the low-hanging fruit is what you want to go for. There's no reason to make things harder on yourself than they have to be. And by going for the low-hanging fruit, you are making things easy on yourself. I think there's a big distinction there between just like being lazy and understanding where you're at and understanding that going for, basically the easier route is oftentimes the smarter play. So we want to talk to you guys about what we think is the low-hanging fruit. Honestly, a decent portion of what we're about to talk about, things that we believe to be the low-hanging fruit, is stuff that Kobe at least mentioned in passing in our interview. Again, freaking fire. That man, he knows what he's talking about. But we're going to take some of that stuff, we're going to expand on it and give you guys kind of our thoughts on what the low-hanging fruit is, where we're kind of focusing. I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily where we're super focused on, but for beginners, like this is really what we recommend doing. And there's going to be kind of two main themes that you guys might notice here in what the low-hanging fruit might be. I'm curious to see if you guys can figure out what those two themes are. So in the Kobe interview, one thing that he talked about was, I think the question I asked him was like, what does he do? What's his process, his strategy for when he's searching for a new product to sell? What does that look like for him? And an example he gave was taking a product that is, already working and then niching it down to a specific group of people and really making it feel like it's for them. And the example that he gave was compression socks, and then angling them specifically for construction workers. They're on their feet all day. They need the compression socks, whatever it may be. Instead of just being like, hey, these are compression socks, they're great for everyone. No, these compression socks, while they could be used by anyone, we are just marketing them towards construction workers. And I thought that was a really great example, because that's really one of the easiest ways, in my opinion. That's really, like, I think where we've seen a lot of success personally is by taking something that is already working, that people are already buying, that's a, somewhat of maybe a popular product, not necessarily like a hot product or a winning product, but something that people buy, and then just niching down the audience, making it more specific. That is one of probably the easiest ways, because it doesn't really require you to be necessarily that good at e-com or at business or at marketing. All you really got to do is take something that's already working, identify who the actual, specific people are that buy that product, and then just pick one of them and only target them. And Kobe honestly already went through this. The way that he does that is by going through reviews, looking at products that are being sold by existing companies in that market, and looking at the reviews, looking at what people say. I bought this because of this. I'm this type of person. I have this kind of a job, whatever it may be. And he just goes through that, and it's a pretty analytical process. I think it's not necessarily like an idea that you just come up with in your head. It's something that you do research on, and then based on that research, you figure out, okay, so these types of people are buying this product. Let's make a store that is specifically for them, and then you make everything based around them. The content, the copy, everything is for that specific kind of person.
Yeah, and I think the key thing there is that it needs to make sense. And some people, when taught this concept, will come up with a store idea that just doesn't really make sense. So you have to niche it down, but it has to make sense why it's for this type of person. So when you take the example of compression socks, angling them towards construction workers, there has to be a reason why construction workers need or want compression socks.
Scotty, did you adopt a Chihuahua or something, man?
Signs of the city. It has to make sense. It has to be something that people in that market are already buying. And I think it's great advice to look at the reviews. Honestly, this is probably how I came up with all the ideas for my skincare brand. When I was starting that, my business partner had a list of products that he had formulas for and or was working on formulas for. And they'd be like kind of general products. On his store, it's pretty general. It's skincare, it's hair care, it's beard care, whatever. And what I saw as my role or the challenge I had was to come up with a specific market, a specific group of people who use these products that we could market towards. And let me give out. I mean, the idea obviously that we ended up picking was our tattoo enhancing body oil. So he had a body oil formula, and he had a lot of customers that were using it on their tattoos. So there was an obvious market there. Big group of people with tattoos that are very passionate about their tattoos. Other ideas we had, I don't know if I want to give these out, but he had a hair oil formula, and ideas that we were throwing around was stuff like hair oil for people with dreadlocks, hair oil for people with extensions, because there's some really expensive extensions, really high-end extensions, and there isn't, as far as I know, obviously I'm an expert in hair extensions, but I don't believe there's any product specifically for hair care for your extensions. So that was another idea we talked about. So just sort of to show you how we're thinking about this and how we come up with these ideas.
Yeah, that's kind of some golden nuggets right there. I was a little surprised that you were giving those away, but I mean, I'd say that's kind of the number one way that we really think of ecom when we're strategizing stores and stuff. When you're trying to compete with all these big companies who are super established that do millions and millions of dollars of revenue each year, it's very difficult to compete with them in a general sense. But someone will buy from you as opposed to Amazon or Walmart or, another big brand. If you really angle your store towards the type of person that they are specifically, when they see that, it's going to resonate with them a lot more. And even if you're more expensive or, you're not as well known or whatever it may be, people will still go with you because you are specifically for them. And that's just, that's kind of a very basic marketing concept, but it's honestly one of the most important when it comes to ecom, especially with the way that we do things.
100%. It just needs to make sense.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's a big part of it. It needs to make sense. You can't just come up with some random thing. But I think it's useful to think about that in terms of like, I don't know, imagine like a matrix, and you start with like a general kind of market or general type of product or something. And then you want to find the subcategories of people who buy that product, who are into that kind of thing. And then you can go and identify those. You can do research to find those and then pick one of them and make it all for them. Test it out. I think you're a lot more likely to see success doing things that way than some of the other strategies that we're going to shit on here a little bit later in this episode.
Yep. For an example that wouldn't make sense, that people do wrongly, they think it makes sense, but it doesn't. Tattoo oil for construction workers. Obviously, we have customers that are construction workers, but that's an example that in my eyes that's not a sensible way to niche down, because the reason why they need tattoo oil or the reason why they want your product is not because they're construction workers. It's because they have tattoos that they want to take care of. The fact that they're construction workers is kind of an irrelevant part of their identity as it relates to your product. if that makes sense.
Yeah. I like that example. So Scotty, you just wrote something down in the outline here that I thought was pretty interesting. I'm curious if you came up with any good examples for that while I was rambling on for the first part of this episode.
I didn't. I forgot about it. So what I wrote down is niching down by solving a problem that customers have with the product of a bigger brand. So say you've got a really big company that's super established in whatever market you're in. Jesus Christ.
Dude, that is just not cool, man.
You'd think I'd have figured out how to.
You can just
Do not
right click on
disturb.
Skype and press close.
Yeah, Skype is not open.
Keeping that in for the authenticity for sure.
Yeah, I just hope he stops fucking calling me. I'm gonna block him.
I hope that didn't destroy anyone's ears listening to this with headphones.
Listen at your own risk. Block this guy 1 second.
Scotty and Nate and Blue Ocean e-commerce are not responsible for any detrimental ear effects that occur as a result of listening to the e-com dispensary.
Yeah. So, niching down by solving a problem that customers have with the product of a bigger brand. Say you've got a company that makes a super cool Swiss Army knife, Victorinox.
Why's it got to be a Swiss Army knife, man? What about a French Army knife? You got something with the Swiss or what?
I'm gonna ignore that ignorant there. You've got a company that makes a super cool Swiss Army knife. And a lot of hunters buy it, a lot of fishermen buy it, a lot of campers buy it. But let's say for one specific of those buyer groups, let's say specifically for fishermen, fishermen have the problem that the knife is really good for some things, but it's maybe too big. Maybe they would like it to have a little scissor to cut off knots on the line, or they'd like it to be a little smaller so that you could wear it on your waistcoat with like a zipper. So if you can find a product that appeals to a broader category of people, but for one of those categories of people, there's an issue. It would be better if something about the product was different. There might be an opportunity to target specifically that group of people that has that issue with a slightly different product that is a better fit for them. Another example, say you're in sportswear niche. You're selling yoga, what are they called? Yoga pants? Jesus Christ. Yoga pants. You're selling yoga pants, and you could go after a specific group of people, say people who are too heavy to fit into the normal yoga pants. You go create a line of plus size yoga pants and market specifically to the big ladies who need the plus size yoga pants that, as much as they'd love to buy from the big brand,
As much as they probably shouldn't be wearing yoga pants in the first place.
The big brand, unfortunately, isn't big enough for them. So basically, you go after a niche problem that the bigger brand doesn't care enough to solve because they're appealing to a broader group of customers. But you can really make a name for yourself by solving a problem that a specific group of people has with their products.
I dig that. I dig that a lot. Definitely requires a bit more critical thinking. But if you thought that you were just going to become a millionaire overnight with ecom without doing any sort of critical thinking, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. And you thought wrong. Critical thinking is definitely necessary in this business. So similar kind of concept to the first part about, taking something that's already working and then niching down the audience. Another thing you can do that's not necessarily niching down is just taking something that's already working and figuring out how you can do it better. Kobe also mentioned this in the interview as well. Most e-com businesses, even if they're successful, even if they're wildly successful, there's a very low chance that they are doing everything right. Even businesses that are very successful are not doing everything right. There's almost always some room for improvement somewhere. If you can find where that is, make a better offer. I mean, I think that's kind of one of the biggest things that we did with our main brand and why that works, because we didn't really niche down necessarily, but we do have a better offer than just about any other brand out there that sells similar products. That's been, one of the main reasons that our brand works. Maybe a brand's ads aren't that great. You think you can make better ads than them? Maybe you could do that. Content, that's a huge one, especially if you have a background in photography or videography or anything along those lines. If you can get better and more high quality content that resonates with the people in that market more than what other big brands are doing, boom, that could be the one thing. This is something that me and Scotty have talked about in pretty big detail in the past. Is you have to do something better or more unique than what other people are doing. And ideally, you're doing something better and more unique, and you're niched down. But honestly, I don't even know if you need all of those factors. You really could probably get away with just doing one or two of them.
But you need to do something.
You got to do something.
You can't just copy and hope that it works for you too, which honestly is what most people with the whole winning product strategy try to do.
That's literally what everyone does. Drop shipping is 95% a cesspool of 17-year-olds just copying each other.
Not just 17-year-olds, adults too.
Yeah, too. I mean 18-year-olds as well. I mean, can't forget about them.
Yeah, it's a problem though. It comes from this fact of like steal what's working. What is it? Good
artist copy, great artist steal.
Copy, great artist steal. Yeah.
Well, that saying actually perfectly represents what we're saying here. Good artists copy. Okay, like copying is one thing, but then stealing, I guess in that context, stealing means taking something and then making it your own, doing something different or better or more unique. At least in the context of the book, I believe that's kind of the concept there. Is you have copying and you have stealing. You want to steal, you don't want to copy.
Gotcha.
But that's kind of the point that we were getting to when I said earlier that, we're going to shit on some other methods. That is the opposite of low-hanging fruit. Copying a quote-unquote winning product from an existing store without changing anything, doing anything new, unique, or better, without doing any sort of critical thinking about how you could get more specific with the market, about how you could better solve a problem than the other big brands in that market. Without doing anything like that, it's not going to work. Like everyone is doing that. And that's, I think, kind of part of the reason that it doesn't work is because that's the fruit at the top of the tree. You got to be freaking Mr. Draft Longneck up there to get those kind of freaking fruits, because everyone's trying to get those. Everyone's already gotten those. They pick the low hanging fruit, and then you're stuck trying to get the high fruit. Just go for the low fruit, man. Don't copy straight away what someone else is already doing. It's not likely to work. And honestly, it's kind of annoying because I feel like it shouldn't work like that. If something is working and you copy it exactly or pretty close to exactly, it should work. Yet, in my experience, that is almost never how it goes. Maybe all those stores that seem to be working just aren't working as well as they seem to be. I'm not really too sure. But that's just the opposite of what you want to do. What everyone else is doing, you want to look at what everyone else is doing and then basically do the opposite. That's pretty solid advice that I think will probably serve you well in multiple areas of life.
True that.
You got anything else to add, Scotty? I mean, I think that's kind of the basic gist of what we consider to be the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, one more thing. I was having this conversation with a buddy the other day, talking about testing products and finding a product to sell. He was under the impression, and I think a lot of you listening probably are under the same impression, that in order for dropshipping to work, you have to sell a product that seems gimmicky and kind of scammy. And
I definitely used to think that.
A lot of people think that. And I think the opposite is actually true. I think you're going to do infinitely better if you can sell a product that does not seem gimmicky and scammy.
I'd probably agree. I think that there is we kind of shit on that whole like, winning product mindset. But all that said, I mean, there are people that do that successfully, that do make that work, that do copy what they see. And I mean, they kind of do that, but then they make it better. Like that's something that if you guys were subscribed when we did the interview with Nick M1K, I think his strategy is a little bit more akin to the kind of, more typical drop shipping product type strategy. But his big thing was he would copy what was already working, but then he would go out and get his own content and he would go make really, really solid ads. And, that's really all it took for him, it seems like. I don't know all the specifics of everything that he's done, but that's kind of what it seemed like to me. And there's a lot of different strategies that work, but no matter what strategy you're doing, you're never going to get away from the fact that it's not going to work if you're just blatantly copying other people. You have to do something that's new, more unique, better, more niche down. Pick one or two of those things and see what you can do there. Use your freaking noggin, do some critical thinking, and see what you can put together. See what you can put together. It's pretty fun, honestly. I mean, this is kind of one of my favorite parts of this whole thing is you get to use your creative mind, and it's a creative process, but it's also a research process, and you combine those two things, and oftentimes you can make something beautiful, something freaking beautiful that generates you money almost on autopilot, even when you're freaking sleeping, man. Even when you're sleeping, it makes you money. How cool is that?
The great thing about Facebook ads is you can also lose money while sleeping. The whole passive income, I'm just going to chill on the beach and my business is going to make me money. Yeah, Facebook ads works both ways.
Passive income? How about passive expenses?
Passive losses, baby.
Passive debt. Let's go. But yeah, that's the basic gist, guys. That's what we think is low hanging fruit. I really think this is a really important episode because, I mean, that's a great topic. Thank you, Mr. Josh, for the recommendation. As always, if you guys have questions about anything that we talked about in this episode, feel free to drop them in Telegram. We can't promise that we're going to answer everyone's questions, but we will do our best to get back to you, especially if they're good. If they're good questions, I think me and Scotty tend to see those and we tend to want to answer them because good questions deserve good answers. And that's what we try to provide. So I think that'll do it. What do you think, Scott, man? You think we're ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, with that all important, yes, sir, we'll talk to you guys in the next one.